She had been driving for so long that the road had become a part of her. It wound beneath her like an old, familiar thread, pulling her onward through a landscape that grew emptier with every passing mile. The hum of the tires was constant, soft and steady, a sound that faded into the background until it felt like the rhythm of her own heartbeat. There was nothing around her now. No towns, no cars, not even the occasional farmhouse or gas station. Just fields that stretched endlessly, golden and dry under the weight of the afternoon sun, and hills that rolled gently toward a hazy horizon. She wasn't sure how long she'd been driving. Hours, certainly. Maybe longer. Time had started to feel loose somewhere along the way, like a sweater unraveling slowly, unnoticed at first, then too tangled to fix. The air inside the car was warm, tinged with the faint scent of old leather and dust. Her window was rolled down halfway, letting in a soft breeze that carried the smell of dry grass and distant wildflowers. She glanced at the gas gauge. Low. Lower than she'd realized. The orange light flickered to life, quiet but insistent, breaking the spell of the endless road. She hadn't seen a sign in ages. No indication of where she was or where she was headed. But there was no panic, not really, only a calm, distant awareness that she would need to stop soon. She let the car coast a little, easing her foot off the gas, scanning the roadside for anything, a sign, a turn, a flicker of civilization, and then, as if conjured from the soft folds of the heat-shimmered air, it appeared. An old wooden sign, leaning slightly to one side, its white paint faded and curling at the edges. Bellbrook, 4 miles. The letters were painted in looping, careful script. Below them, a hand-drawn arrow pointed left toward a narrow road that seemed to slip between 2 stands of tall, dark trees. Bellbrook. She didn't recognize the name, but something about it pulled at her. Maybe it was the way the sun hit the trees, casting long, cool shadows over the road, or the simple, worn elegance of the sign itself, like it had been there forever, waiting just for her. Without a second thought, she turned the wheel, the tires crunching softly over gravel as she followed the arrow. The road narrowed as she drove, the trees leaning in close, their branches arching overhead like a canopy. The sunlight grew dimmer here, filtered through layers of leaves that whispered in the breeze. She felt herself exhale, releasing something she hadn't realized she was holding. The air was cooler beneath the trees, fragrant with pine and damp earth. It was quiet, not silent. There was the soft rustle of leaves, the occasional creak of branches, but quiet in a way that felt sacred, like stepping into a cathedral of wood and stone. The road wound deeper. Her hands rested loosely on the wheel, and she let the car drift at a slow, steady pace. There was no rush here, no sense of urgency. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she wondered why she hadn't checked her phone, why she hadn't tried to find a map or search for another route. But the thought passed quickly, slipping away like water through her fingers. Ahead, the trees began to thin and the road leveled out. And then she saw it, the town. Bellbrook revealed itself slowly, like a painting coming into focus. Neat rows of buildings lined a wide main street, their facades painted in soft, muted colors, cream and sage and faded blue. The storefronts were small and charming, with wooden signs that hung from iron brackets, swaying gently in the breeze. There were flowers everywhere, window boxes overflowing with trailing ivy and bright blooms, pots of lavender and rosemary perched on every step. Everything was neat, pristine even. The sidewalks swept clean, the windows polished to a soft gleam, but there wasn't a single person in sight. She pulled the car into an empty parking space near what appeared to be the town square, the tires crunching softly over the brick-paved street. She turned off the engine. The sudden stillness was complete. No voices, no footsteps, no music drifting from open windows, just the distant call of a bird, the soft sigh of wind through the trees at the edge of town. Her heart beat a little faster, but not from fear. It wasn't frightening, this emptiness. It was peaceful in its own way, dreamlike. She opened the car door and stepped out, the air cool against her skin. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime stirred, its soft notes drifting through the quiet like a lullaby. She wandered slowly down the street, her footsteps echoing lightly on the bricks. Shops stood with doors closed but not locked, curtains drawn but not tightly. She peered into one, an old bakery, its shelves neatly stocked with loaves of bread and pastries that looked freshly made. She moved on, passing a barber shop, a bookstore, a tiny post office. Everything was perfectly kept, but still, no one. The sun was sinking lower, bathing the town in golden light that seemed to stretch the shadows long and thin. She walked back towards her car, glancing down the road she had entered from, and her breath caught. There was no road. Where it had been, there was only more town, more streets, more buildings, stretching out endlessly in both directions, as if the way she had come had simply vanished behind her. She turned slowly, her pulse quickening. The town was quiet, still bathed in warm, fading sunlight, but it felt different now. Not dangerous, not hostile, just waiting, as if it had been waiting for her all along. Her heart thudded in her chest, not loud, but steady, like the ticking of a clock in a quiet room. Where there had once been a narrow road slipping between the trees, there was now only more town. Another row of tidy shops, another stretch of lamplight beginning to flicker on. It was as though the town had rearranged itself behind her, closing off the path she had traveled gently, silently, without resistance. She looked around, but everything remained still. No faces peered from windows, no doors opened, no voices called. She was entirely alone. And yet, it didn't feel abandoned. Quite the opposite. It felt occupied. Watched, perhaps, but not with malice. It was softer than that. Subtle, like the sensation of being studied from a distance, or the way flowers seem to lean towards sunlight when no one is watching. She wandered deeper into the town. The air grew cooler as the sun dipped lower, carrying with it a faint, sweet scent, honeysuckle, lavender, and something faintly metallic, like rain on old stone. She passed a row of houses, each one charming in its quiet way. Painted shutters, lace curtains, carefully tended gardens spilling over with blooms in every color. Candles flickered in a few windows, their glow soft and golden, but there were no sounds from within. She paused beside a wooden bench near the edge of a small park. In its center stood a fountain, its stone worn smooth by time. Water spilled gently over its edges, the sound soft and soothing. She sat down, listening. Somewhere in the distance, a bell chimed. It was faint at first, just a single note, long and low, drifting through the air like mist. Then another, and another. The clock tower at the heart of the square, tall and elegant, its hands unmoving despite the chiming. She watched it as the sound continued, counting each ring. 7 chimes, then silence. She waited, expecting something to happen in the stillness that followed, but nothing stirred. The town remained as it was, quiet, empty, yet somehow expectant. The last of daylight slipped away, leaving everything bathed in the silver hush of twilight. One by one, the street lamps began to glow, their warm light pooling on the bricks, casting soft halos onto the streets. She stood and began walking again, drawn now toward the heart of the town. The clock tower loomed ahead, its face pale and unlit, the hands forever frozen at 12. Near its base, she found herself standing before a small glass-fronted shop. The sign above the door read, Bellbrook General Store, established 1887. The window displays were perfectly arranged, rows of glass jars filled with old-fashioned candies, tins of tea, hand-bound notebooks stacked in careful towers. Her reflection in the glass looked strange in the lamplight, pale, blurred around the edges, as though she were fading into the soft glow of the town itself. She turned away. The streets behind her seemed to stretch farther now, new alleys, new corners she hadn't seen before. A curious curiosity stirred in her. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was something deeper, a pull, slow and patient, as if the town was inviting her to explore, to wander deeper. And in the fading light, she did. She walked slowly, letting the streets lead her wherever they wished. There were no maps here, no signs pointing the way, but the town seemed to open for her, revealing new paths as she moved, an archway here, a staircase there, each one drawing her farther from where she had begun. Hours seemed to pass like minutes, or perhaps it was the other way around. Time had softened, stretched thin like silk, barely noticeable against her skin. She could hear soft sounds in the distance, faint music, the gentle clink of dishes, footsteps too far away to see. But every street she turned down was empty. Still, the sounds never stopped. They followed her, just out of reach, like the lingering scent of flowers carried on the breeze. Eventually, she found herself back where she had started, standing once again near the fountain at the park's center. The clock tower loomed overhead, quiet now, its hands still frozen. She felt strangely calm, tired, but not frightened. She walked back to her car and sat inside. The seat was cool beneath her. The windows were fogged slightly from the evening air, blurring the edges of the town beyond. She rested her head against the seat, watching the lights flicker through the misted glass. And somewhere in the distance, the bell began to chime again. One slow, soft note at a time, calling, inviting, welcoming. The night deepened. The town of Bellbrook settled further into its soft, glowing hush, as though it had wrapped itself in a thick quilt of fog and lamplight. Inside her car, she had drifted in and out of a shallow sleep, never fully resting, never quite awake. The kind of sleep where dreams seep into reality, and it becomes hard to tell one from the other. She wasn't sure what had woken her. Perhaps it was the faint sound of footsteps passing nearby, or the whisper of a door closing softly just beyond the edges of hearing. When she opened her eyes, the windshield was fogged with condensation. The world beyond was blurred, but she could still see the glow of street lamps casting circles of amber on the empty streets. She sat there for a moment, unmoving, feeling the weight of the night pressing gently around her. And then she saw them. Figures. They moved slowly through the streets, their steps unhurried, deliberate. At first, it was just a shadow, barely a flicker at the corner of her vision. But then another appeared, and then another. They seemed to emerge from the town itself, slipping out from doorways and alleyways, gathering quietly in the soft pools of lamplight. Men and women dressed in simple, old-fashioned clothes, linen shirts, long skirts, woolen coats and hats. Their faces were pale, but not ghostly. Their skin looked like porcelain, smooth and flawless, glowing faintly in the dim light. They didn't speak. They simply walked. Some moved along the sidewalks with quiet grace, their footsteps almost soundless on the bricks. Others gathered in doorways, watching, their expressions calm but unreadable. It was as if the town had awakened around her, and now its residents were slipping back into place after some long, quiet slumber. She felt no urge to hide, no instinct to run. Instead, she stepped out of the car, the door clicking softly behind her. The figures paid her no mind at first. They simply continued their slow procession, moving through the streets like dancers in some silent, forgotten waltz. She followed them. Her feet moved almost without her will, carrying her deeper into the town's winding paths under the soft glow of lanterns swaying gently in the cool night breeze. She began to notice details about them. Their clothes were impeccably clean, but worn at the edges, frayed cuffs, patched hems, buttons dulled with age. Their faces, though smooth, all bore the same faint, serene expression, neither joy nor sadness, just contentment. Occasionally, one would glance in her direction, not sharply, not with alarm, but as though noting her presence with quiet approval, as though she was meant to be there. More figures emerged as she walked. Children in soft dresses and suspenders, skipping along the curbs, an elderly man with a silver-tipped cane tapping it gently with every step. Two women, arm in arm, their laughter barely a breath above the silence, fading almost before it reached her ears. They gathered in the town square beneath the tall, looming clock tower, standing, waiting, their faces lifted toward its unmoving hands. She stood at the edge of the square, watching them. The fountain still whispered its quiet song nearby, and the soft chime of wind passing through the town's many flowers filled the air with a strange, soothing melody. And then slowly, the townspeople turned their gazes toward her.
all at once. No words, no sudden movement, simply their eyes, every single one, resting calmly upon her. It wasn't threatening, but it wasn't nothing either. It felt like recognition, like they had been waiting for her to notice them fully. The moment stretched long and quiet between them, thick like velvet. Then, as softly as it had begun, the spell seemed to break. One by one, they began to move again, this time toward her, slowly, carefully. Their footsteps were soft, but she could hear them now, an almost rhythmic sound, like the tide slipping in and out over smooth stones. She didn't step back. Some part of her, deep inside, was curious enough to stand her ground. The first figure to reach her was an elderly woman, dressed in a pale blue gown with a lace collar and a small silver brooch shaped like a key. The woman's eyes were the color of river stones, gray, soft, and endless. She smiled, gently. Then, in a voice that was barely more than a breath, the woman spoke. "You made it." That was all, but in those words something shifted inside her. A memory stirred, half-formed and elusive, like a dream slipping away upon waking. Before she could speak, the woman reached out, her cool fingers brushing lightly against her cheek. The touch sent a ripple through her. Not fear, not cold, but something deeper. A feeling of belonging. And then, as though on cue, the rest of the townspeople began to smile. Soft, knowing smiles, as if they had been waiting for this all along. The woman spoke again, her voice like wind through autumn leaves. "We've been waiting for you." The bells began to chime once more, 12 slow, deliberate rings. The town held its breath, and somewhere in the depths of her heart, she felt herself beginning to remember.
The bells rang out across the town. 12 slow, deep chimes, each one folding into the next like ripples moving through still water. She stood at the center of it all, surrounded by the quiet, glowing townspeople. Their eyes remained fixed on her, watching, waiting, not with hunger, nor threat, but with something deeper. A quiet patience, as if this moment had happened before and would happen again. The old woman, her fingers still resting lightly on her cheek, smiled once more and withdrew her hand. "You've come farther than the others," the woman whispered, her voice barely audible beneath the last echoes of the bell. "Far enough to remember." The words settled over her like a weight. Farther than the others? The others? She tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. Instead, she looked around, really looked. The faces of the townspeople were clearer now, sharpened by the midnight glow of the lanterns. And there it was, hidden in plain sight. Familiarity, not in their faces, but in something deeper. A young boy near the fountain, spinning a wooden toy between his fingers. She had seen him before, on the roadside days earlier, walking with a woman down a dusty path. The elderly man with the silver-tipped cane, his face appeared in her dreams sometimes, standing by an old door that wouldn't open. The woman with the key-shaped brooch, her voice had echoed in her mind before, in quiet moments, speaking words she had never quite understood.
They weren't strangers. They had always been here. She had always been here. Her knees softened beneath her, and she lowered herself to sit on the fountain's cool stone edge, breath shallow, heart pounding, but not from fear. It was memory, uncoiling, blooming. The townspeople parted slowly, and the old woman gestured toward the base of the clock tower, where a narrow door had appeared, tall, arched, carved from dark wood with an iron keyhole that shimmered faintly. "You know what this is," the woman said gently, tilting her head. "You've known since you first saw the sign." Bellbrook. Yes. It wasn't a name she had stumbled upon by chance. It was a thread she had been following all along, without knowing. She stood, legs steady now, and approached the door. The townspeople said nothing, their eyes following her in quiet reverence. When she reached the door, she saw the key already waiting, resting on a small hook beside it. Simple, old, iron, worn smooth from countless turns. Her hand closed around it, and it felt familiar, like something long lost and finally returned. As she lifted it toward the lock, she heard the old woman's voice once more, calm, almost soothing. "You know once you open it, the road behind you is gone. You know this." She paused, key poised at the threshold, her mind filled with fragments, faces, roads, whispered voices, choices she couldn't remember making, but none of it frightened her. There was no going back. That truth had been with her from the moment she arrived. With a slow, steady breath, she turned the key. It slid into place easily, and the lock gave with a soft, ancient click. The door drifted open without force, revealing nothing but soft white light beyond, gentle, glowing, warm. Without hesitation, she stepped inside, and the door closed behind her. The world inside was endless. She stood in a vast, shimmering space, neither room nor landscape, but something in between. It stretched outward infinitely, filled with a quiet hum like distant singing, layers of soft voices blending together in peaceful harmony. And there, rising before her, stood a great tree. Its branches reached high into the glowing air, each limb heavy with keys of every shape and size, iron, brass, silver, bone, keys that swayed gently as though stirred by an unseen breeze. At the tree's roots sat a circle of stone, smooth and worn, as though many had stood there before. She stepped into it, drawn forward by something beyond thought. As her feet met the stone, the tree stirred. Its branches lowered slightly, and from the highest bough, one key began to fall. Slowly, gracefully, it drifted downward, glowing softly, until it came to rest in her open hands. It was beautiful, silver and glass, delicate, yet unbreakable, and on its stem her name was carved. Her true name. Not the one she had been given in the outside world, the name of apartments and phone numbers, of jobs and old, forgotten places. This name was older, the name she had carried long before she had ever set foot on the road. The townspeople appeared again, surrounding the edges of the glowing space, their eyes kind and knowing. The old woman stood nearest, smiling softly. "You found your way back," the woman whispered, as the bells began to chime once more, this time softer, slower, a lullaby. The key pulsed with warmth in her hands. Memories rushed in, not all at once, but in soft, steady waves. She remembered the road, the first time she had come here, the moment she had chosen to forget, to leave, to wander out beyond the edges of Bellbrook. How she had promised to return one day. And here she was. She wasn't trapped. She had been called back. Because Bellbrook wasn't a place you stumbled upon. It was the place where those who had wandered too far were welcomed home. As the final bell faded into quiet, she lifted the key and placed it upon her heart. It dissolved into light, soft, silvery threads that wrapped gently around her, weaving into her skin, her bones, her breath. The townspeople bowed their heads and their smiles deepened. She understood now. This wasn't an ending. It was the beginning again. The circle unbroken. And beyond the soft glowing horizon, a door began to open once more, leading to a place familiar, yet new. A path not out, but deeper in. She turned toward it, feeling lighter than she ever had. The old woman's voice followed her, soft as wind through leaves. "We'll see you again." And with quiet steps, she walked into the light. Morning came softly to Bellbrook. The streets were quiet again, bathed in the pale, golden light of dawn. The air was cool, still touched by night's lingering chill, but threaded now with the warm scent of blooming jasmine and fresh bread rising somewhere unseen. The fountain whispered its steady song in the town square, and the clock tower stood watch, its hands still unmoving, forever caught at the hour of arrival. The townspeople had vanished with the night. No footsteps echoed along the brick streets, no distant laughter, no chiming bells, just stillness. And yet, it wasn't empty. Somewhere beyond sight, behind windows and doors, they remained, waiting, watching. The car still sat parked at the edge of the square, untouched, its windows misted by morning dew. But the driver's seat was empty. The woman was gone. No sign of her lingered, no footprints, no discarded map or suitcase, as if she had never arrived at all. But the town knew better. The town remembered. Somewhere deeper within, beyond the doors that only opened at midnight, she had taken her place among them. Another light in the quiet heart of Bellbrook. Another name returned to the tree. And the town waited, as it always had, for the next traveler to wander too far, for the next lost soul to follow the road that wasn't on any map. Somewhere, out in the world beyond, another driver was already growing tired. Another wanderer was missing a turn, lulled by the soft pull of forgotten roads and distant lights. It was always this way. Somewhere, beyond Bellbrook's quiet streets, another car was beginning to slow. Another traveler was drawing near, and the town at the end of the road was waiting.